Hey guys, tonight we slip straight through temporal curtains and step into the sun-bleached world of ancient Egypt, where the Nile sparkles like a ribbon of life, palm trees sway in a relentless breeze, and the pyramids, yes, those geometrically pleasing mountains loom, casting mile-long shadows. Imagine sand between your toes, the low hum of cicadas in the air, and just out of sight, a temple guard who probably disapproves of your sandals. Candles flicker on earthen altars. The distant laughter of children floats behind mud brick walls, and a priest prepares incense for, well, let's just call it necessary negotiations with supernatural landlords. You, ordinary in life, are about to become extraordinary in preparation for death. Because believe me, the afterlife in Egypt is not for the faint of heart or the chronically disorganized. You probably won't survive this, unless you take notes. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I also want to know, where are you listening from? And what time is it right now? Throw your city and local hour in the comments. Egypt's midnight is somebody else's noon. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in bustling Memphis, city of white walls. Its sunlit streets alive with traders hawking onions, scribes muttering about papyrus shortages, and artisans sweating over gold inlays as if someone's afterlife depends on it. Ancient Egypt smells of animal fat, sweet lotus, and something suspiciously like wet straw. You notice the priests, bald, linen-robed, always glancing upwards, wary of angry gods and jealous cats. Your own family is preparing for the biggest event since, well, your birth. And if you thought middle school graduation was stressful, wait until you see the afterlife application process. Around you, people mumble rumors whose tomb had the fancier false door, which neighbor's child claimed to see Bastet in a dream, or which royal cousin tried to bribe the embalmers for extra nice linen. You squint at the horizon and see a funeral procession winding past the Sphinx, where bored teenage guards use their spears as makeshift walking sticks. All these rituals seem to swirl together in an endless dance parades, banquets, shadowy priests, golden tips dropped into offering bowls, and always the looming reminder. Everything you do is a rehearsal for what comes next. The Egyptians really did believe that this magic land, swaying with blue-green reeds and whipped by the river winds, was controlled by a complicated traffic system of gods, some friendly, some, let's just say, temperamental. Every cowbell rung at dawn, every loaf of bread baked, and every poppy petal left on a shrine fit into the cosmic balance known as mat, truth, order, and the opposite of just winging it. Real historical fact. Ancient Egyptians genuinely structured their days around rituals meant to keep the world running smoothly, not just their own lives, but the whole universe. Their calendars overflowed with festivals, celebrating everything from the flooding of the Nile to the birthday of crocodile-shaped gods. If you were late for a ceremony, you weren't just getting a side-eye from your aunt somebody somewhere claimed the sun might literally not rise. Here's the quirky tidbit. They covered children's heads with fat cones of scented grease. Yes, imagine walking around with a cocoa butter candle that melts slowly into your hair as the party goes on, so everyone knows you're one of the cool kids. It's either advanced aromatherapy or history's first failed attempt at leave-in conditioner. Historians still argue whether these cones were everyday fashion statements or just for high-glam funerary portraits. But either way, you probably smell better than the average goat herder. As you walk past the Nile, you greet the river with silent respect. Everyone knows the best way to catch the god's attention is through polite bowing and, occasionally, placing a bread offering somewhere the ducks can't immediately snatch it. In homes, daily life is an odd shuffle of chores, but underneath it all simmers that anxious anticipation of what's to come. Some neighbors boast of great-grandparents who live on inside-decorated tombs. Others whisper cautionary tales of souls lost in the desert, turn to unhappy ghosts because they forgot a crucial amulet or two. You duck into a market for a goodbye snack and maybe a talisman, wondering if you should splurge on that lapis lazuli necklace. A passing merchant tries to sell you fake mummified fish, allegedly a hot gift for departed uncles and day. Dreams about trading up to a pyramid with better acoustics for ghostly chanting. The line between the living and the dead in Egypt is threadbare, blurring out in rituals, dreams, and those mysterious festivals where everyone dresses up as their favorite deity. If you don't nail every part of the process, and trust me, it's a long checklist, your soul might get stuck running errands for eternity with a beak-headed demon. Through all this, the ultimate anxiety. How do you make sure you're ready for the big journey? The older folks mutter about the things you'll need. Pure linen, a good story to tell Osiris, possibly a sturdy pair of sandals. No one wants to be that guy, the one who arrives in the afterlife forgetting his own name, or worse, rocking a last season's funeral shroud. The morning of your preparation dawns. You've got sticky fig bread in one hand, questions in the other, and a slightly nervous feeling in your stomach, like the time you tried to barter with a baboon for a ring. A distant bell rings, and you realize it's go time. Because in ancient Egypt, getting ready for the afterlife isn't just about hoping for paradise. It's making sure you have all the paperwork, ritual bribes, and background checks to convince the universe to let you in. And yes, unlike modern airports, there is definitely a chance of losing your luggage. Right as you turn the corner, a group of women ululate those dramatic, high-pitched cries that send shivers down your spine and signal that somebody, somewhere, is preparing for their soul's next destination. You take a deep breath, roll your shoulders, and steel yourself for the first task on your afterlife prep list. Picking the perfect outfit for eternity, something that even the gods can't side-eye. Because if your look doesn't slay, well, you might find yourself haunting the fashion district in the Field of Reeds, forever the butt of the world's oldest makeover joke. So you stroll back home, heart pounding in anticipation, and kick off your well-worn sandals on the smooth clay threshold. The house smells of barley bread and yesterday's incense, a little smoky, a little sacred, and definitely in need of ventilation. Before you do anything else, your mother ushers you toward the ceremonial chest. It's time to choose your afterlife outfit. No pressure, right? After all, historians tell us the ancient Egyptians took this seriously. Your soul wardrobe is not just a fashion statement, it's quite literally your cosmic passport. No turning up to paradise, looking like you got dressed in the dark. You run your hands over stacks of dazzling linen crisp, white, and cool between your fingers. Egyptian linen, spun from the flax that nodded for miles along the banks of the Nile, was so fine that it could be sheer as a modern laundry bag. Sometimes, the richest pharaohs demanded up to 20 layers, just for that breezy, ghost-in-a-cloud effect. Slaves and the less fabulously dead could hope for a single layer if it wasn't borrowed from an ancestor. If you want to look like you belong in the heavens, you're going to need something soft, pure, and as wrinkle-free as humanly possible. Since there weren't exactly afterlife dry cleaners in the field of reeds, your best bet is to hope the embalmers did a nice job folding. Of course, it's not just any linen. To impress Osiris, you'll want the kind spun with ceremonial purity washed, woven, and cut by hands that had to refrain from sneezing, cursing, and apparently even zucchini for a few days. Historians still argue whether these textile taboos were followed religiously, or if your cousin Nefertari snuck a snack when no one was looking. Each fold, each pleat, carries symbolic weight, order, cleanness, and divine favor. If you're lucky, your family might even spring for a touch of pale blue dye from rare woad or imported indigo, so your ka can coordinate with the sky. Whatever you do, don't ignore the accessories. Egyptians adored jewelry. Some tomb paintings could rival any contemporary runway for sheer sparkle density. Chunky collars of faience and semi-precious stones jangle at your throat. Lapis for dreams, turquoise for health, gold for it's always gold for everything. A gold toe ring here, an intricately beaded ankle cuff there, because yes, even your feet have to look ready to walk straight into eternity. Every respectable afterlife wardrobe needs amulets too. These are the real insurance policy. There's the heart scarab, carved out of greenish stone and inscribed with "Don't snitch," spells to keep your heart from tattling on your naughtier earthly deeds. The Wajet eye pendant protects you from evil glances. You pick out a tiny jed pillar, symbolizing stability, because if there's one thing the gods appreciate, it's consistency. Fun fact time. One princess was found buried with 765 amulets. That's not bling. That's full-body magical armor. Maybe she was a bit of a hoarder. Maybe just very, very careful. The finishing touch? You reach into a velvety pouch and draw out your chosen amulet. You mutter a little prayer, hoping the scribe who inscribed your name got the spelling right. Historians love to debate whether a miswritten cartouche might result in identity confusion somewhere in the bureaucratic afterlife. What if you accidentally get mixed up with legendary prankster Poneb and spend eternity stuck peeling onions instead of floating above lotus ponds? Some scholars argue that mistakes could be fixed with a little extra prayer on the side. Others? Well, don't say I didn't warn you. In case you're worried about looking too extra, the ancient Egyptian sense of style was less is more, and more, add more until my soul glows. Hear the rustle of beaded belts. Catch a whiff of perfume, usually a little myrrh dabbed behind the ears, or one last glorious application of those melting scented cones you learned about before. Yes, that means you still have cocoa butter seeping into your scalp, but at least you'll smell like a sacred garden in full bloom. You catch your reflection and try to smirk like a demigod. Don't forget to look solemn, but not too nervous. Nobody wants to be remembered for their deer in torchlight grimace in the tomb murals. Somewhere, a family member clears their throat. Your older cousin teases you about forgetting your sash, while your little sister tries to sneak a faience cat figurine into your pocket for luck. It's a family affair, this outfit selection. Parents fret over hem length, aunts debate necklace placement, while someone always insists, in a whisper, that you could never top Great Uncle Hotep's sapphire collar. And did you know? Some royal burials packed in fake beards even for women. In the afterlife, facial hair is all about divine status. I mean, nobody ever wants to be upstaged by their own goatee in front of Anubis. The vibe is half runway show, half magical armor fitting. There's an elaborate ritual. Too, sometimes, a priest flicks natron-scented water over your head, chanting spells to keep moths and evil spirits at bay. Your cat weaves between everyone's legs. You hope it remembers you kindly when it inevitably becomes a figurine by your side. Historians still argue whether the elaborate jewelry and amulets were meant for yours truly, or were more about showing off for the gods, a way for the family to flex their devotion. Maybe it was both. Maybe, deep down, the ancient Egyptians understood that if your afterlife look is immortalized in wall paintings and awe-inspiring statuary, you've sort of hacked immortality. And that, after all, is the goal tonight. Dress for the life you want. One last look, a little shimmer of turquoise glinting in the low lamplight, and you're ready. Across the room, relatives bow their heads, murmuring prayers for you and for their own luck. You straighten your Wadjet eye pendant, smile just a hint. Too much confidence might anger jealous ancestors, and prepare for the next challenge. Because now that you're dressed for forever, someone has to worry about feeding you for forever. After all, you can't be the best-dressed soul in the afterlife if you're hangry. You slip into the central courtyard, catching the savory, yeasty scent of something baking in the next room. Turns out, dying in Egypt is the opposite of skipping dinner. Your afterlife requires a menu so elaborate, it'd make even the pickiest food critic jealous. As you take your seat, elders bustle about slicing figs, slathering honey on thick barley loaves, and arranging dishes not just to eat, but also to display. No pressure, but what you choose for your tomb says as much about you as your profile pictures do today. If you pack shoddy snacks, the ancestors gossip, and trust me, you're not going to hear the end of it in the field of reeds. Tonight's meal is called the funerary feast, which is less final meal, more. Please dash eat dash so dash your dash ISN single quotes D dash HAAI Y dash forever dot. Braziers sizzle with goat and duck. Baskets spill over with grapes, pomegranates, and little wheels of white cheese. You pass around the salted fish, nibble on lotus root fritters, and marvel at the sheer number of lentils that can be creatively disguised as something more glamorous. One of the house girls pours wine, her laughter lilting above the clatter of plates, her eyes darting to catch any spilled drops. A good omen if it stains your funerary linen. You see, historians have found tomb paintings that act like eternal restaurant orders. I'll take the endless bread, honey, and beer hold the crocodile, please. Mainstream fact. Food painted or carved onto your tomb was magically recreated for your soul. A buffet on cosmic repeat. Piles of gleaming onions, baskets of bread loaves bundled together by careful stone carvers, and the ever-present beer jugs. Ancient Egyptians loved bread and beer so much. It's basically Egypt's version of peanut butter and jelly. They believed these staples could fuel a soul for eternity, even if it meant your ghostly metabolism outlasted your appetites. But it isn't just about stuffing your tomb with snacks. For the rich and ritzy, grave goods become a sort of ancient flex. Dazzling inlaid boxes, board games like Senate, furniture, and even pet cats stuffed or just represented in statue form get loaded up. Your family debates the wisdom of including your favorite doll with a missing arm, or if a painted fishing boat will impress the afterlife inspectors. Some believe it's practical. You never know when you'll need to whip out a flute, a comb, or an emergency jug of perfumed oil in paradise. Others, let's be honest, just want to show off. Here's the quirky tidbit. In several tombs, archaeologists found model bakeries' literal dioramas showing tiny, kneeling figures baking microscopic loaves. That's the ancient ancestor of, hey, just in case my soul craves cake at 3 a.m. for eternity. They even packed miniature breweries, model butchers, and tiny winemakers, just in case your ethereal party gets out of hand. Imagine being the kid in charge of setting all that up. I bet more than one ancient teenager grumbled, "Why do I have to carry Grandma's favorite fake cheese? She won't even need it." Of course, historians still argue whether every grave good was meant for actual use in the next life, or if some were symbolic family brags to the neighbors. Maybe for the obsessively prepared, each item literally mattered, just in case the gods did a surprise room inspection. While you chew a honey cake, an old uncle leans over with a serious face. Remember, pick something you'll never get bored of. Eternity is a long time for stew. You nod. Part of you worries you'll forget an essential condiment pepper, coriander, or whatever it is they sprinkle on those little roasted quail legs. Somewhere down the corridor, a cousin tries to hide an extra jar of beer in your basket, just in case Osiris gets thirsty too. Finally, as the last of the garlic-scented lamb is arranged, you make the ceremonial choices. Barley for strength, lotus petals for grace, sweet dates for happiness, and yes, a stack of onions. Because Egyptians considered onions magical and possibly capable of warding off both evil spirits and awkward small talk. Your family tucks in, and so do you, savoring every bite as though you truly might never taste it again. As twilight falls, a scribe approaches with a piece of papyrus, brush poised. "Anything else for your eternal menu?" He inquires, his tone implying that missing even one item could doom your afterlife to blandness. You glance at your feast. Maybe one more round of honeyed bread, and why not a whole tray of pomegranates? They're said to be the snack of the gods. There's a brief debate. Should you go minimalist and hope the gods appreciate subtlety, or play it safe and go maximalist, loading every dish you can fit? Historians still argue if Osiris preferred quantity or quality. The scribe jokes, and everyone laughs, but a few nervous glances go to the incomplete fruit bowl. With your menu finalized, the meal becomes a ritual part group therapy, part insurance policy. A priestess waves a censer, chanting low and sweet to ensure every aroma carries up to the waiting spirits. The food is enjoyed, then reverently cleaned up. No crumbs wasted, since even a single grape could become mystical in the right hands. You're left with a satisfied belly, a lingering taste of lotus, and a feeling that maybe, just maybe, you've checked off the hardest part of preparing for eternity. Later, as the shadows lengthen and the laughter drifts out into the starlit courtyard, you wonder what's next on your checklist. They say the soul's journey truly begins with a makeover. Probably not the kind you're thinking, but trust me, it's going to leave you looking unforgettable. The temple's shadow stretches long and cool across hot paving stones as you approach the next stage of your preparations. If the thought of getting ready for the afterlife sounded overwhelming before, just wait. Modern spa days have nothing on the full-blown, multi-step process the Egyptians invented. A process that sets the standard for all future makeovers, whether you're prepping for magazine covers or immortality. Yes, tonight you finally meet the true MVP of ancient self-care. Mummification, the world's oldest glow-up. But don't expect cucumber slices or seaweed wraps, unless, of course, you count natron as the original exfoliant and riverbank reeds as the hottest new facial mask. You step inside one of those seriously secretive embalmers' workshops, the kind where every surface is smeared with resin. Oddly shaped tools hang from polished racks, and the mood lighting is somewhere between cozy and terrifyingly accurate hospital drama. The embalmers, highly respected, slightly mysterious professionals, greet you with reassuring nods and, in perhaps a questionable display of hygiene, hands thoroughly dusted in natron powder. Your first lesson. Preparing the body is both a technical marvel and a ritual dance. Failure here means more than just a bad hair day. Botch this, and you might come out the other side as a rather embarrassing cautionary tale, the sort told by uncles to make children eat their onions. Here's a solid historical fact to anchor you. Mummification was originally reserved for pharaohs and the super-rich, but over time, almost everyone aspired to it. Why? You needed your body in tip-top shape for the afterlife. Egyptians believed you'd need your limbs for walking, your mouth for eating never-ending buffet food, and your heart. Well, you'll see about the heart later. So, preservation became an obsession. Over thousands of years, techniques got fancier, layers more refined, and soon enough, an entire economy grew up around the death industry. Step 1 on your spa itinerary: purification. The embalmers gently wash you with sacred water, usually gathered from the Nile at sunrise, or maybe from the temple's own bubbling pool. You know, the VIP soap. Some lucky candidates are splashed with prized palm wine, and if the gods are feeling generous, there's a spot of frankincense mist, perfect for banishing both bad luck and unpleasant pre-afterlife odors. Step 2. Removing the wet bits. This part, warning for the queasy. You find yourself contemplating more than just what outfit you'll wear for eternity. No, let's be honest. Let's never underestimate the power of a statement necklace. Here's where you come face to face with the vital question. What kind of coffin do you deserve? And will your afterlife neighbors judge you for it? The practice of wrapping yourself up to face the next world is only half the story. Now you need a box worthy of all your final hopes, dreams, and a few guilty secrets. Picture the woodworkers back in bustling Thebes, their hands stained with ancient paints, chiseling cedar and acacia by torchlight, probably griping about how you wanted an extra ibis painted on the lid. Scent of varnish and incense hover in the air. Decor is more than for show hieroglyphs line every inch. Spells are inked to help you dodge underworld dangers, and the colors carry their own magical weight. Did you know that the blue pigment shimmering even by lamplight sometimes contained crushed lapis or copper? If you want tomb bling, you'll pay for it, but it's worth it. A traditional Egyptian coffin could be as simple as a planked wooden case or as elaborate as a nest of gilded shells, each layer more finely worked than the last. Your picks, though limited by budget and social standing, telegraph your status to both gods and jealous neighbors. And don't forget, you want the coffin to fit snugly. No one likes a loose wrap, not in fashion, and definitely not in burial. Ancient texts say the artsy outer casing helps reconstitute your earthly body each morning. Imagine that as if your face needs reconstructing before coffee. But if you go top tier, like Pharaoh Tutankhamun, you're basically encased in several golden coffins, stacked like mystical Russian nesting dolls. Historians still argue whether the multiple layers were security against grave robbers or the ultimate flex. Here, the sarcophagus comes into play a grander marble or limestone jacket for your decorated coffin, often carved with threatening curses and smiling gods. It's the equivalent of private security. Anyone thinking of taking your favorite shabby figurine might think twice. But here's a fun tidbit. Sometimes there are inscriptions telling grave robbers it's not even worth their time because the good stuff is already gone. Honesty or just creative reverse psychology? Scholars bicker over whether these warnings worked or if looters saw them as a dare. You stand beneath the wide Egyptian sky with preparations in full swing and artisans closing in to measure you. Imagine trying not to wiggle too much as someone traces out a sarcophagus template awkward yet historic. The ticking of reed pens, the clack of wooden rulers, and the gruff hold still all add to the process. You get the strange sensation of being a living exhibit. Your height, face, and features immortalized with a blend of flattery and accuracy. It's not all vanity Egyptian spells written on the sides would call you by name. Display your best deeds, and sometimes admit a little creative exaggeration. Egyptologist debates still rage over how literal these carvings were meant to be. Was boasting in stone the Instagram filter of the ancient world? Your box's style depends just as much on religious function as personal taste. You might go for the anthropoid look crafted to resemble your own face, glowing with inlaid eyes and arched brows. The gods are believed to read you back to life with these images. Or you might opt for geometric forms and protective illustrations, winged goddesses, potent eyes of Horus, and snakes who promise to bite any pesky soul that stirs trouble. If you're lucky, sneaky, or both, maybe a priest will sneak in a secret curse for you. A strange fact. Some coffins have decoy eyes painted on the outside, almost like those stick-on googly eyes people use to make inanimate objects friendly, but these ones scare off the dead. Historians still debate if this was more about religious power or a cosmic joke. For the superstitious, protective symbolism is everything color, form, inscriptions. Green signals rebirth, blue, immortality. Gold, the flesh of the gods, is the ultimate material flex. But if you're not royalty, you improvise. Cheaper tombgoers might splash yellow paint on wood to fake gold. Think of it as the world's earliest gilded spray paint job. Even pharaohs weren't above a little product placement. Modern forensic scientists have found that King Tut's fancy coffin was, in part, upcycled from a previous queen's, so not even royalty skips a good thrift. And let's not gloss over the lid. This is the face you present to the world, or at least to eternity. Sometimes it actually is your face, beautifully carved and painted, forever in carefully idealized repose. Other times, it's an amalgam of features, a composite of best self. A slumbering mask so convincing, even Anubis would pause and check if you're one of his own. Remember those spells you paid for in Section 6? Some get painted here, offering protection against wild demons, ill-wishers, or anyone who didn't bring you a respectable grave offering. The actual closing of the coffin is a big deal too, complete with chanting, perfumed oils, and wads of resin heated till it drips and seals you in sacred darkness. According to mainstream fact, this step was believed to ensure that your soul didn't wander or get stuck in a cosmic traffic jam. But here's an oddball detail. Some families included a tiny peephole, not for your ghost, but so that your loved ones could symbolically visit and shout encouragement into the void. Historians still argue whether these peepholes were meant for communication with the dead or were just a workaround for anxious relatives needing an excuse to double-check on you. As you settle into your eternal sleeper pod, you can't help but hope those spells work, those seals hold, and that somewhere in the afterlife, no one giggles at your painted mustache. After all, you've only got one shot at your entrance. And in ancient Egypt, first impressions last literally forever. Or at least until some tomb robber with a chisel and poor impulse control decides otherwise. Magical amulets jangle softly against your chest as you step into the lamplight, the intricate blue-green beads catching the glow, illuminating hieroglyphs stitched onto your linen collar. You're armoring up not with bronze, not with shields, but with the power of tiny sculptures, semi-precious stones, and incantations that could sound like a tongue twister to the average ancient scribe. Welcome to the ancient world's answer to a magical self-defense kit, which you absolutely want in your afterlife go bag. No legitimate journey to eternity gets far without a layered stack of these charms, each imbued with their own strange flavor of sky magic, earth wisdom, or just really good marketing from a local priest. You find yourself in a chamber that smells faintly of frankincense, tanned papyrus, and a little bit of cat fitting, since you're basically raiding a well-stocked temple shop as you shop for afterlife survival gear. First up, the scarab. Insects aren't usually the pinnacle of fashion icons, but for an Egyptian soul, that dung beetle is the MVP of rebirth. The heart scarab, sized perfectly to fit beneath your collarbone, comes inscribed with mystical spells from the Book of the Dead, specifically spell 30b. Supposedly, it tells your heart not to snitch about any misdeeds when you're up for judgment. Mainstream historical records vouch for how widespread these charms were. Archaeologists find them clutching the chests of peasants and pharaohs alike, sometimes with inscriptions that are so botched, you wonder if the engraver was doing it with his eyes closed, or just half listening to the spell. But your jewelry box isn't complete with a single scarab. Egyptians were the original maximalists. If one amulet is good, 20 is just sensible risk management. You slip on the Wajet eye, a stylized swirl of lapis lazuli and turquoise, meant to shield you from the evil eye and spirits with unresolved workplace drama. Hang a jed pillar, too, symbolizing stability and the backbone of the god Osiris, which you hope comes in handy if your afterlife yoga gets intense. Tuck a tiny ankh near your neck, just in case you forget that eternal life is the endgame here. Some amulets are simple, others painstakingly carved, but all are supposed to channel divine protection, even if no one can quite agree on which amulet combo is the fast pass through the underworld. As your arms get noisily weighed down, you notice a priestess meticulously pronouncing a string of words over each talisman, her voice echoing against the star-painted ceiling tiles. That's because a magical item without its activation spell is just a very pretty paperweight. And if you're thinking this is starting to sound suspiciously close to early Dungeons and Dragons, you're not wrong. The ancient Egyptians believed a spell's power depended as much on its correct pronunciation as on its written form, which means that if your scribe had allergies or a head cold the day your spells got recorded, well, you might be looking at an eternity of customer service issues. Historians still argue whether reciting the Book of the Dead out loud for the mummy, as was done in select burials, actually charged the amulets with supernatural oomph, or whether it was just for ceremonial effect, which, to be honest, is kind of what every in-the-know priest mumbled at parties after 2 goblets of date wine. You kneel before a low table where the Book of the Dead sits open, its pages still smelling of fresh ink, edges curled from nervous thumbprints. Because yes, this isn't a book meant to be read and shelved, but a handheld survival manual. Unlike the single holy books you might know, the Book of the Dead is really a collection, a choose-your-own adventure, packed with over 190 spells, depending on your social class and anxiety level. You picked your favorites, one to guarantee you breathe, One so you don't lose your voice when asking Osiris for directions. Another in case you wake up accidentally turned into a goose. Not all spells were created equal. Some were written on lavish sheets of papyrus. Others hastily scribbled onto linen bandages or shabby figurines, because sometimes you realize 3 days before your trip that you forgot to pack basic survival skills. One lesser-known fact: some spells promised that should all else fail, you'd be able to transform into an animal and sneak away from Troublehawk, Swallow, or even a lotus blossom, if you feel especially zen. Egyptians were nothing if not flexible about escape plans. But the Book of the Dead's entrance exam to the afterlife was constantly evolving. New spells would get added, and old ones got quietly omitted, depending on which deity was trending that decade. Scholars still debate whether this pick-and-mix spell formula was made to genuinely boost your odds, or if it existed to boost the bottom line for ambitious temple scribes. You sweep your growing collection of magical paraphernalia into your linen pouch, feeling a little like a magical girl from an ancient Saturday morning cartoon show, ready to summon help at a moment's notice. But beware, a few spells in the Book of the Dead are, frankly, questionable. One favorite warns against being devoured by a snake while fishing in a celestial lake. Given the limited risk of afterlife angling, if you weren't high-ranking, you suspect maybe some spells were upsold for the luxury crowd. And of course, some amulets can get you in trouble. The infamous tie-it knot, or the Isis knot, pops up everywhere as a protective charm, but a competing priesthood in a neighboring town might tell you it's suspicious, or even unlucky, unless it's blessed by their temple. Ancient Egypt was nothing if not the original battleground for brand influencers. Sliding your collection into your leather satchel, you appreciate the craftsmanship and the occasional typo and realize you're basically carrying around the ancient equivalent of phone apps. A protective spell for every scenario, from opening magical doors to toggling between invisibility and bravery modes. It's all up to the gods. And maybe a little bit of solid state-backed enchantment. You glance around, double-checking nothing's missing. Those intricate, sometimes bizarre magical tools now smuggled beneath your wrappings are your buffer against a world where lions might heckle you with riddles and vengeful baboons could steal your soul. And as you slip yet another beaded amulet up your arm, because if one was good luck, 3 is just basic insurance, you can't help but wonder, will all these borrowed powers, passwords, and charms really stack the odds in your favor, or just make you the flashiest ghost at the underworld party? The tomb is silent, heavy with the weight of 1,000 hopes layered in hand-smooth paint and ritual dust, but you're not lulled into a false sense of security. You have to watch your step in here, literally. The Egyptians, both the ancient architects and their more superstitious clients, were deeply invested in tripping up not just grave robbers, but any mischievous spirit or, a rookie afterlife traveler like you. Maybe you thought getting to your tomb was stressful, but compared to this, parallel parking a chariot is child's play. Your torch flame wavers as your foot hovers over a smooth block of limestone. On reflex, you recall the warnings whispered from embalmers and local storytellers. Don't trust the straight-looking path. Watch for false doors. Those doors are painted masterpieces, not entrances but elaborate, magical misdirections meant to puzzle anyone living, dead, or undecided. Some say these doors gave the ka, or spiritual double, a way to slip back and forth between worlds. Others think they just existed to make any would-be tomb snatcher mutter, just great, before getting hopelessly lost. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians genuinely believed souls could use these false doors, or if the whole concept functioned like spiritual surveillance cameras, a subtle way to keep both mortals and ghosts in check. You brush a hand along the wall, the stone cooler than you expect. Maybe a geometrically painted archway hints at otherworldly passage, but you're not fooled. Goosebumps ripple up your arm, not from fear, but the tiny thrill of being part of this elaborate cosmic prank. Your memory serves up a legendary tale. One burglar, drunk on leftover offerings, smacked into a false door, so convincingly real that he apologized to Osiris out of sheer embarrassment. Mainstream Egyptology agrees these doors are neither accidents nor simple wall art. They're loaded with spells to fool everyone from greedy looters to nosing neighbors angling for a posthumous house tour. Spooky, yet stylish. A sudden cool draft sweeps the chamber. You know what comes next, traps. Now, the ancient Egyptians didn't go full Indiana Jones with rolling boulders, but they had their brand of trickery. Some tombs boasted shifting flagstones that, when stomped in the wrong order, would drop the greedy straight into locked pits. Sometimes sand would pour in, swallowing footprints and clues alike, erasing all evidence of entry. The real genius, though, came in the form of curses' jagged hieroglyphics squirming along doorframes. Whosoever disturbs the sleep of this tomb shall have their heart eaten by crocodiles. Isn't that a cozy bedtime story? One particularly quirky rumor says an early tomb featured a set of fake stairs leading nowhere but a deep, hidden well. Local legend claims its only victim still echoes there, forever shouting for a sandwich. Scholars, as always, debate how frequently these stunts worked, or if the rumors were mostly Tomb Guild hype. You proceed with exaggerated care, half expecting glowing scarabs to crawl from cracks, but all you get is the scuttle of some very ordinary lizards. You pass by an elaborate inscription: "He who breaks this seal, may he never eat bread again." Let's be real, no one wants to risk eternal hunger, especially when cosmic banquets are so close at hand. The threat feels both humorous and chilling. The Egyptians knew how to blend their ominous with a dash of culinary anxiety. Some legacy tombs had their walls honeycombed with secret passageways. You test a palm against the cool surface, and for a second, think you hear a hollow thud, but it's wishful thinking. Your entry is planned, not stolen. Still, the knowledge that any passage could split, zigzag, dead end, or double back keeps you alert. Ancient texts hint at entire dummy chambers, packed with decoy treasures, painted wooden bowls, hollowed-out gold statues, and in one overeager pharaoh's vault, a chest filled only with sand. There's archaeological evidence for these elaborate ruses, though scholars wonder if the best con jobs are forever undiscovered. Either way, you notice yourself tapping your valuables to make sure you haven't accidentally ended up in a prize every time zone. Your senses stretch to the edges of the darkness. Soft echoes bounce back. Maybe it's just your footsteps, or maybe something more. The hair on your arms lifts as you sidestep a shadowy alcove whose mouth is painted with the snarling face of a chaotic demon, tongue out in eternal mockery. This painted demon might be there to spook grave robbers, but also possibly to keep your more troublesome subconscious thoughts in check. Mainstream experts often see these figures as symbolic, psychological scarecrows. Gear theories argue that the most creative images, the fiercest grins, were designed to give a genuine fright to spirits, not just people. Historians still argue whether tomb walls were psychological mazes for the living or real barriers for ghosts. You remember with a shiver what your embalmer said as he handed you that slightly sticky amulet. Keep it close. You never know who else is wandering these halls. Then, as you're puzzling over a series of lines cut into the floor, your foot kicks something clunky, one of those infamous clay jars used to stash away curses for trespassers. You resist the urge to open it, recalling at least one unlucky apprentice who did the same and allegedly spent the rest of his spirit life sneezing scorpions. Is it an urban legend? Maybe, but not worth testing. Navigating further, you pass a wall of repeating symbols. Open hands, closed fists, an eye forever watching. You mutter the appropriate spell at least. You hope it's the right one. You never were great with hieroglyphic grammar. Each symbol is a safety net, either guiding your K on its way, or, if flubbed, sending you straight into a magical dead end. According to fringe Egyptologists, the original Book of the Dead contains so many alternate roots and tester spells that scholars today are still piecing together choose-your-own-afterlife stories. Some even argue that, if you were clever enough, you could bypass entire underworld hazards, skipping straight to the good stuff. You finally reach a chamber glinting with treasures. But the further you walk, the more you realize. The path is less about riches, and more about endurance, wit, and trusting that, after all this trickery, the ancient Egyptians were rooting for you to make it through. You're half tempted to toast your own survival, if only you hadn't left the beer 2 chambers back. With a deep, careful breath, you prepare to meet the next round of cosmic gatekeepers, quietly grateful you've dodged traps, confounded curses, and avoided that afterlife pitfall of eternal, echoing embarrassment. So you survived the party hats made of perfumed fat. You've been wrapped tighter than a springtime dolma, and you're still on track with your afterlife checklist. Congratulations. Next, you need a tomb. Not just any hole in the sand, mind you. In Egypt, your tomb is the ultimate eternal real estate, the flashy address you'll be defending for. Oh, the rest of time. Imagine you're about to shop for a home, but instead of location, 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 the prizes go for symbolism, secrecy, and square footage for painted jackals. You're standing on the edge of a construction site. Sunlight blazes off limestone dust, hammer blows ring in the air, and someone just tripped over a stray ibis. Artisans are everywhere sweating masons, paint-splattered apprentices, a foreman yelling about blue pigment shortages as if the world depends on it. Newsflash. Historians still argue whether tomb design was dictated by strict religious protocols or some creative architect's need to impress the boss. Your guide, probably a cousin of dubious trustworthiness, leads you through the options. Simple pit burial for minimalists, small brick mastabas if you like the boxy look, or if you're the pharaonic type step pyramids and valley cliff tombs, precariously perched and threatening to slide into the Nile every rainy season. Most people, spoiler alert, go for a rectangular tomb with a few well-placed inner rooms, a chapel area for offerings, and secret passageways. Legend says the best tombs have so many hidden doors, even their owners would get lost on a bad eternity day. A fact to chew on: the ancient Egyptians were obsessed with Ka, Ba, and Ak, their trinity of the soul, and believed these needed physical homes to visit, eat offerings, and generally crash after a night out haunting the living. Your tomb isn't just a glorified storage closet. It's a living, breathing portal between worlds. That's why walls are covered in spells, hymns, and eternal grocery lists. Scholars still debate whether all this elaborate art and architecture was meant to trap spirits, delight gods, or double as the ancient world's longest Instagram story. Anyway, you get to design each detail. Want a false door? Absolutely. You'll use it to pop in and out whenever you're summoned for ritual dinners or dramatic reappearances at family crises. Space for Shabdas? Yes, those servant statues need somewhere to stand. Secret stash for cursed jewelry? Well, as the saying goes, never trust a tomb robber with your spare nose ring. Now, about those guest accommodations. The real Afterlife hosts always include a feast room. You set aside space, preferably with high ceilings. After all, you don't want the gods bumping their heads when dropping by unannounced. And make sure everything's painted. Offerings, servants, heaps of onions, slices of ox, and bouquets of blue lotus. A quirky tidbit. While it looks like Banquet Central, nobody's totally sure if all these murals were meant as magical food coupons for the soul or subtle reminders to future visitors not to show up empty-handed. Egyptian party etiquette. Always assume you're being watched by relatives, spirits, and probably the odd crocodile god with opinions. And don't forget the wall art. Time to bring in those long-suffering artisans who would sometimes sneak in little jokes or paint things upside down out of spite if they didn't get paid enough dates. Your walls could depict touching family reunions, solemn purification rituals, or, for the seriously extra, scenes of wrestling hippos or playing ancient board games. Historians are forever wrangling over how literal or symbolic tomb paintings were. Was that epic leap across the river a real event, or just a flex in front of Osiris? Even the boldest murals leave room for debate. Outside, you might want a little garden slab, because nothing says eternal chill like a shallow pond, a withered sycamore fig, and a few stylized ducks. The field of reeds, the ultimate Egyptian paradise, is always shown as a landscape of endless grain and blue water. So consider this your lucky lawn starter kit. Go ahead, dream big. Who wouldn't want their eternal home to come with a backyard? Once you're happy with the layout, it's time to commission one of those lengthy curses to ward off potential tomb robbers, or that one nosy cousin who's always just checking the gold count. Ancient curses are an art form. May your limbs tremble, may your face melt, may you sneeze for all eternity if you disturb my rest. They went all out because, really, who wants company after death besides a loyal cat? As the masons polish the final slabs and the last pigment dries, you realize building your tomb is as much about what you leave out as what you put in. Space is finite, but trust me, ancient Egyptians could squeeze a pottery jug into any crevice. You hear laughter and shouts as children chase lizards. Fun fact. Archaeologists sometimes find generations of family members stacked together in single tombs, all politely facing the door, in case someone drops by with offerings. Are they chilling together, or just waiting for eternal room service? The debate continues. You hover in the glow of torchlight, making a mental checklist. False door? Check. Feast hall? Check. Witty curse? Check. Shabty shelf? Check. Extra room for pets? Check. At some point, an apprentice asks if you want your name spelled out in gold leaf or lapis lazuli. Choose wisely if the name fades. So does your memory, and nobody wants to be a blurry footnote in some future archaeologist's Twitter thread. And as night falls, your finished tomb glimmers in the moonlight. You slide your hand along the cool limestone and think, not bad for a new address. Solid airflow, plenty of storage, and enough wall art to keep Osiris amused for centuries. You hope your preparations carefully sketched, colorfully painted, anxiously debated, will keep you safe, remembered, and above all, well fed in this next incredible chapter. Because even in the afterlife, it's all about who you know, where you live, and whether you remembered to ghost-proof the basement with a curse or two. The air at your final farewell feels heavy with incense, as if all the old perfumes of Egypt have gathered for this most pivotal occasion. Here, family, friends, and even your neighbor's nosiest goats play a part. No, seriously, in some places, livestock is obliged to line the funerary parade, as if semi-domesticated audience members help boost your afterlife ratings. This is the moment you witness an ancient Egyptian funeral in all its extravagant and occasionally chaotic glory. Imagine the sand under your feet crunching as relatives hustle about, their arms weighted with woven garlands, trays balanced with pungent offerings, and faces painted not just with grief, but meticulous streaks of kohl. Professional mourners swarm the scene, dressed in the kind of all-black linen wrap that says eternity, but make it dramatic. They start wailing at an emotional frequency only crocodiles and anxious uncles can hear. You try not to laugh, but the heartfelt sobbing breaks new decibel records. Some mourners even shake dust onto their hair or rip at their clothing to dial up that devastated by loss look. Historians still argue whether these expressions of sorrow were strictly heartfelt, or if some tears tumbled out on cue for the right compensation. Either way, you better hope your family splurged on talented criers after all. Rumor has it Hathor, goddess of music and emotion, awards points for range and commitment. Here's what's wild. The act of communal wailing ululation wasn't about being loud for the sake of it. Egyptians believed the gods and deceased souls themselves listened in. Every sob was a performance, proving that you mattered. Your absence left a crater, and, most of all, that you had a crowd behind you willing to spend a lazy Tuesday parading your legacy up and down the Nile. Actual historical fact. Funerary processions snaked through towns with musicians, dancers, and even acrobatic troops. Picture what's basically the world's first block party, only with fewer food trucks and more jackal-headed priests swinging incense censers. As you make your way among the living, Granny sniffling loudly, your little cousin sneakily pocketing pomegranates, you ponder the growing train of followers. Friends, a few pious enemies, and sometimes literal hired hands paid in bread, beer, and the ancient equivalent of Uber tips. There's a high-stakes element. A well-attended funeral means you enter the underworld with undeniable social proof. Egyptian logic dictates that a big crowd equals a big reputation, and you want the gods to know you had clout. Still, beneath the noise, the honest heartbeats of tradition pulse strong real affection, real sorrow, and the awkward giggle when someone trips over your not quite flattering ancestor portrait. It's here the funeral games start, staged performances, borrowed from the mythic deeds of Osiris, reenacted through song, dance, and a wild card known as the lamentation duel. Sometimes, two teams of mourners try to outsob each other, drumming on their chests and wailing skyward, all while the neighborhood dogs try to join in. A quirky tidbit. Egyptians held that the sound of lamenting voices could actually become a bridge between the world of the living and the next realm, almost like a telephone line made from sound alone. If your relatives botched the lyrics or flubbed the dance steps, well, you might arrive in the afterlife with a few missed calls. Meanwhile, you spot the priests hairless, meticulous, and all business leading the procession. They sprinkle natron, mutter spells from memory, and avoid the jealous gazes of any cats who feel snubbed as divine guests. At some funerals, priests slip secret amulets under your wrappings, hoping to load you up with cosmic cheat codes. There's also the reading of the opening of the mouth, an elaborate ritual designed to restore your senses so you can eat, speak, and apparently sass lesser deities once you cross over. Historians debate whether this rite was performed just once or repeated through different stages, but everyone agrees no one wants to greet Anubis mute and snackless. As the procession approaches your final resting place, a team of musicians strikes up a mournful tune, harps, lutes, maybe an old guy with a double flute daring to improvise. The elders murmur prayers. The youngest relatives stare in awe at the painted sarcophagus, eyeing the mythic creatures and wondering if you really did ride a sunboat as a child, as the family legend claims. The sense of community swells. If ever there was a place for closure, this is it, unless, of course, the local embalmers get stuck in traffic again, in which case your arrival may be fashionably late. Remember, though, not all funerals are created equal. In some periods, if you weren't rich, your send-off was more do-it-yourself. Home-baked bread, a single flute, a makeshift tomb marker that doubled as a literal wish-you-were-here postcard. And if your family skipped steps or underperformed in grief display, worries buzzed through the ranks. Would the gods overlook your passage? Would a poorly sung lament come back to haunt the family group chat for generations? It's a cosmic popularity contest. The more heartfelt the chaos, the better your standing. The show must go on long after the mourners wander home, scent of incense clinging to their hair, stories and songs lingering into the dusk, and your name echoing in the ears of the gods. Nothing's guaranteed, though. Historians bicker over whether the drama is about impressing Osiris, persuading relatives, or just giving the local theater kids some practice. What's certain? If your family nails this send-off, it'll give you a fighting chance where it matters most beyond the veil, clutched close by memory and myth. You listen, eyes rimmed with sleep and heart thumping along with the distant drumbeats. The afterlife is so much more than a solo journey. It takes a village, a noisy, loving, sometimes melodramatic village. And as you glance back from the shadow of your tomb, you feel that bittersweet push, ready, or at least extremely well choreographed, for the next adventure. All right, here's where you truly begin to earn your afterlife stripes. By plunging straight into the shadowy underworld, the ancient Egyptians' infamous do-it. Imagine, the sun has just dipped below the horizon, and the world around you slips from golden afternoon into a strange blue twilight. A cool breeze whips across the Nile, and you sense, with every hair standing on end, that this is no ordinary journey home. Instead, you're embarking on the most confusing, obstacle-filled road trip in human history. Think of it as the supernatural equivalent of trying to find your Airbnb using a map made entirely out of riddles and crocodile-themed street signs. You leave the familiar behind temple bells, honking hippos in the river, nosy neighbors gossiping about tomb decor, and start sliding down a tunnel painted with spells and monsters. The air belongs to another world now. It's heavy with incense, echoing with the far-off chants of priests, and intermittently cut by the terrifying growl of something big enough and toothy enough that even the gods gave it a wide berth. This is Do-It, land of the dead and denizens far weirder than any late-night party guest. Every Egyptian, pharaoh, or farmer knew that simply dying wasn't enough. The afterlife required skill, cunning, and let's face it, a pretty heroic level of personal admin. According to countless painted tomb walls and scraps of papyrus, you must navigate 12 zones, or hours, each one packed with cryptic guardians, magical gates, and hazards that make stepping on a Lego seem like a spa treatment. That's your mainstream historical fact for tonight. Egyptians truly mapped out their afterlife on fantastical charts, believing each soul would pass through a labyrinthine underworld before reaching paradise. The first stop lands you before the gates of the West, a grand portal guarded by a snake with legs. Yes, really, a snake with legs, which sounds less biblical villain and more, who let the creative team have wine at lunch? The gatekeeper sniffs at your passport. If you pass, you're granted entry, and hopefully not eaten on the spot. The further you trudge, the weirder it gets. In the field of knives, you tiptoe while hidden blades snick through the reeds. The hieroglyphic walls flicker as torch flames cast shivering shadows. Lion-headed crocodiles, centipede gods, and snakes that spit fire, or rumor has it, just really mean poetry. You clutch your Book of the Dead, a sort of cosmic cheat sheet tight in your ghostly grip. Too bad no one gave you a copy in the language you actually speak. Hieroglyphics look cool, but aren't exactly user-friendly at 3 a.m. at 3, in the dark, with your soul on the line. A quirky tidbit for your journey. Ancient Egyptians loved their maps so much that some even commissioned underworld travel games on their coffin lids. Picture your afterlife as a cross between a very serious board game and the world's first escape room. A little less clue, a little more. Don't let the baboon-headed god eat your heart. Some tombs feature intricate layouts showing which spells to use at which gates, much like labeling your snack drawer. Hands off. Except the stakes are, well, eternal. You reach a crossroads, marked by 3 feathered guys arguing about jurisdiction. Historians still debate if this part of the afterlife was truly a real place, or just a symbolic map of the soul's moral journey. Some argue it was as literal as the caravan routes to Nubia. Others think the do-it is more dreamscape than real estate. Either way, you definitely don't want to take a wrong turn. Nobody likes explaining to Osiris why you washed up in the crocodile pool instead of the paradise lounge. Every so often, the ground shudders beneath your sandals and a river of serpents slithers by. They ignore you, too busy squabbling over lost treasures and the dignity of wearing 2 crowns at once. At one point, you narrowly avoid bumping into a giant scarab beetle Khepri rolling the sun through the underworld, busy, committed, and definitely not in the mood to autograph your linen sleeve. Did I mention some guides claim the underworld is upside down during the night? That means you might be walking on the ceiling right now, though gravity, as always, steadfastly refuses to clarify her rules. Occasionally, you stumble on another traveler, just as shell-shocked and under-peppered as you are. You'd shake hands, but you're not sure if your companion is all the way dead or just heavily invested in staying very quiet, a respectable tactic, given that palace-sized snakes sometimes eavesdrop for Osiris. Your own sense of direction is questionable at best. After all, Egyptian gods loved their metaphors, and none of them seem to have invested in a decent GPS. You walk and occasionally run, especially when a minor underworld demon mistakes you for a late-night snack. There are moments when you wonder if you're going in circles, but the symbols change, now silver lotus flowers, now towering obelisks flanking streams that glow electric blue. If you're lucky, Your amulets light the way. Remember those lapis and carnelian charms from earlier? This is when you need them most. Some glow. Some just vibrate awkwardly in your pocket, like a ghostly phone on silent. But all are supposed to guide you past traps, riddles, and spirits who are still upset about ordering the wrong afterlife menu. About halfway through, a chorus of baboon-headed judges assembles, howling cryptic questions about your life. Did you cheat at Senate? Did you feed your neighbor's donkey when she was sick? Did you ever eat the last date in the bowl and blame your cousin? The rules keep changing, and so do the monsters. Ancient Egyptians believed spells spoken aloud could physically transform obstacles, turning giant snakes into shoelaces or rivers of fire into iced tea, provided you get your syllables right. Easy, right? Unless you're the type who stumbles over tongue twisters. As you make your way, ducking mutant geese and sidestepping beetles the size of your regrets, you realize that the journey is less about brute strength and more about remembering all those lessons handed down by your grandmother, the ones about patience, cleverness, and not talking back to lions, living or painted. You edge ever closer to your heart's final test, carrying the exhaustion and strange hope of someone who's nearly through the world's most intense endurance obstacle course and still hasn't lost their sense of humor. Osiris looms ahead, resplendent and ancient, his green face aglow within the shadowy hall of two truths. You're nudged forward by Anubis, who smells faintly of myrrh and seems to have an unreasonable amount of patience for lost, nervous souls. Your chest tightens. The judges, 42 of them, because apparently the gods outsourced bureaucracy, peer down at you from their high-backed thrones, each more intimidating than the next. Some have crocodile heads, some falcon. A few probably can't pronounce your name. But none of it matters now, because the moment has come for the weighing of the heart. You wipe grimy palms on your best linen and step onto a floor so polished your toes squeak with each step. Before you, a gigantic golden scale glitters. On one side, your heart no pressure, and on the other, the feather of Ma'at, symbolizing cosmic truth and order, not the fluffy stuff you flick at your siblings. You glance at Thoth, who sports an ibis's head and what looks suspiciously like a sarcastic grin. He's got his papyrus out, quill at the ready, prepared to write down absolutely everything that goes wrong. Historians still argue whether Thoth's main job was scribe, judge, or cosmic stand-up comic, but in any case, he takes his role seriously. You feel as if your entire life is being flash replayed through the world's harshest security camera. You steel yourself as Anubis leans in, his fingers oddly gentle as he carefully places your heart in its golden dish. The organ doesn't thump or beat, but weirdly, you sense it has a memory of everything you've done, from stealing cakes as a child to being polite to that one neighbor you didn't like. Then, with reverence, Anubis adds Ma'at's feather to the opposite bowl. It glimmers strangely holographic, as if the universe can't decide if it's a bird bit or a cosmic USB stick. Actual fact. Egyptians believed the heart held all your memories and essence, not the brain, which they cheerfully discarded during mummification. Yes, you're basically standing trial with your emotional hard drive, hoping there are no embarrassing files left unswept. A hush falls over the hall as the scale wobbles. The tension is so thick, it could rival the smell of a 3-day-old fish offering. You try to recall every good deed you've ever done, a kind word to a friend, a loaf of bread shared, the time you refrained from shoving a cousin into the Nile. But of course, you also remember the time you lied about breaking a family vase, or borrowed figs from the orchard under cover of darkness. Now, here's an odd tidbit. In some less popular funerary spells, Egyptians listed all the bad things they had not done, over 100 of them. This included things like, I have not eavesdropped, and I have not stolen bread. Some versions even mentioned not stealing from temple offerings, or, my favorite, I have not turned away the water in a canal. It's clear that even thousands of years ago, a well-watered neighbor feud could make its way to your afterlife resume. Anubis watches your face, impassive. If your heart is lighter the feather of Mat, your ticket to paradise is more or less stamped. But if it's heavier weighted down with lies, greed, or that time you tried to cheat at Senate well, things get problematic very quickly. Enter Amit, part crocodile, part lion, part hippo, all bad news. She's already licking her chops at the foot of the scales, looking at your fart like it's a mid-morning snack. You may remember her from your nightmares. She is, after all, the original "you are what you eat" cautionary tale. At this crescendo of suspense, what if you sneak in something unexpected, say, a pickle? Don't laugh, grave goods have historically included figs, onions, and the occasional foreign trinket. Would a brined cucumber tip the scales of fate? Historians still argue whether unintentional items or magical substitutes in your wrappings could confuse the process. Some texts seem designed to outwit the gods' special spells written on scarabs, inscribed on heart amulets, all supposedly able to cheat the scale. But whether Osiris, Thoth, and friends are truly outfoxed by clever paperwork remains a hot topic among Egyptologists. You hear your own voice, trembling but strong, as you recite your negative confession. The priest coached you for hours, and now you rattle off the litany. I have not killed, I have not stolen, I have not. 42 times, one for each judge, hoping that somewhere in the shuffle they'll overlook that time you seriously considered regifting an amulet. As the feather mysteriously lifts, your heart aches for reassurance. You sneak a glance at Anubis, who may or may not wink. The scale steadies, the feather, and your scarlet heart, bobbing like two ducks on the Nile. Moments stretch out longer than your least favorite cousin's wedding banquet. Then, Osiris nods the verdict delivered in the elegant flick of his elegant green hand. If you pass, and here's hoping your karma stacks up, you're invited forward to join the ranks of justified souls. If not, well, Amit gets a new chew toy, and your soul dissolves into non-existence. No pressure, right? Some strange cases have surfaced in the sands of history-excavated hearts, mysteriously missing, lips sewn shut, amulets jammed cheekily under tongues. Were these attempts at divine trickery, or simply insurance for a nervous soul? Experts can't agree, but what's certain is that you, staring down eternity, are deeply grateful that no one asked for your browser history. The Hall of Two Truths echoes with a low chant as the chorus of judges, priests, and possibly a bored hippo or two pronounce your fate. The smell of incense and lotus becomes sharper a scent that thousands of years later, archaeologists will still find caught in the ragged linen of your burial wrappings. One last look at the scales. Whether your heart passes or trembles under the cosmic feather, the moment defines your eternity. Even now, you sense that the gods may appreciate a little boldness, a quick offering of humility, perhaps a joke about the price of onions, or just the right note in your voice as you step boldly off the scales and head toward your next destination, paradise or Amit's waiting jaws. In ancient Egypt, One fluffy feather could tip the universe. No matter what, you gave the gods and all those onlookers a judgment day to remember. And so you dust yourself off figuratively, since even your soul seems to have tracked in bits of desert grit, and stepped through the shadowy gates of the afterlife's grandest networking event, a surreal meet and greet with the immortal VIPs themselves. Anubis, jackal-headed lord of embalming and lost things, waits nearby, his stoic canine features giving away nothing. Bastet prowls behind, tail high and emerald eyes fixed on you, exuding both comfort and the faintest threat of an accidental clawing. Hieroglyphs swirl in the gloom, the walls shimmering behind pillars as if the stories themselves are sighing for your attention. If you thought passing through airport customs was stressful, wait until you try making small talk with a god who invented judgment. You advance, heart featherlight hopefully, after that intense weighing scenario. The first god to greet you is Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe, pen poised in readiness, eyeing you as if you're about to recite multiplication tables. His feather quivers. Name? He demands, in a voice both echoey and nasal, like someone trying to talk through a hollow reed. You answer, maybe a little shakily. After all, you've rehearsed this for years, right down to the formal Ra at the end, just to show you can pronounce things better than your cousin, who forgot his vowels at the tomb gate. Thoth notes every syllable. If you mess up, he'll probably draw a doodle of you with a donkey's ears in the margins of eternity. Historical fact: the Egyptians believed you had to correctly announce your own name to the gods and recite a litany of magical negative confessions. Essentially a list of things you swear you never did. I never stole bread. I never gossiped about my boss's wig, and so on. In the ancient Book of the Dead, these confessions were as carefully curated as your best Instagram posts. A single slip, and you might be redirected to a less glamorous afterlife, possibly with worse lighting. But here's a fringe detail. Some depictions show that the line to meet Osiris and his council was rather crowded, with dozens of other souls shuffling. Not unlike a DMV, something not every sacred scroll bothers to mention. Imagine, you're nervously clutching your amulet. The soul in front of you is muttering about how their Shabdis have unionized and won't do laundry anymore. And somewhere, a minor god is handing out magical number slips. Its remarkably relatable eternal bureaucracy didn't skip the Nile Valley, apparently. You're ushered forward again, this time by Matt herself, radiant and serene, with her telltale ostrich feather balanced just so. Her presence is calming, but also oddly intimidating, sort of like running into your school principal at a pizza buffet. She tells you, not unkindly, honesty gets you far here, but don't push it. Historians still argue whether Matt took an active role greeting souls, or simply let her feather do all the talking. Either way, you nod earnestly and try not to think of that one time you sneaked into the granary for extra honey cakes. Nearby, a baboon-headed god named Happy Waves, trailing clouds of incense, the ancient version of handing you a moist tillette before dinner. Happy controls the lungs and the whole body parts, committee of the 4 sons of Horus, each responsible for protecting bits of your mummified self. You're not sure whether to thank him, but a polite nod seems to work. The afterlife's etiquette guide is blurry at best. You look up literally, since the next presence towers above you. It's Sekhmet, lioness of both healing and downright terrifying destruction. Her mane flickers like sunlit reeds, and though she promises protection, you suspect it's only if you're courageous enough never to admit fear. A soft purr from Bastet reassures you. Not every feline god is here to judge, unless you committed the greatest sin of all, forgetting to leave milk out at the favorite shrine. Anubis moves closer, his hands cool, fingers surprisingly gentle. Ancient texts say this shadowy deity handled all the embalming, and he inspects your heart scar, the invisible line left over from your previous weighing. Imagine for a second the Egyptian belief that this god guided not just royals, but everyone, peasants and nobles alike, through the maze of the afterlife, their guiding paw sometimes literal, sometimes only sensed in a rush of goosebumps. You're glad you never joked about jackal breath during your life. Here's a detail you may not expect. In the crowded pantheon, gods sometimes changed jobs, swapped attributes, and even competed. Sobek, the crocodile god, might crash the panel just to show off his muscle and challenge Horus to a wrestling match, while Hathor, goddess of joy and music, flutters by with a sistrum, ensuring the afterlife's playlist is anything but silent. Did you know some high priests believed in a rotating divine schedule? Which god was boss of which region often depended on who paid for the latest renovation at the temple. Historians still puzzle over whether your afterlife experience depended on your address. Was it deluxe Nile side or basic sand dune package? The official answer is, the jury's still out. You sidestep an argument between Nephthys and Isis, who are deep in debate about whether the living should be allowed to send snacks by magic mail. One says yes, the other's worried about allergies. The gods, it seems, are as dynamic as any ancient family reunion. You hide your giggle behind a respectful cough. After all, in the presence of all these ageless beings, good manners might be your best magical defense. Something bumps your ankle, a shabdi dashes by, chased by a tiny, very persistent demon with the head of a beetle. No one seems alarmed. Apparently, even in the afterlife, paperwork occasionally goes astray. If you ever doubted eternity includes its own breed of chaos, well, there's your proof. Back on Earth, some people carved extra shabdis just in case, a testament to the ancient fear of administrative delays. Your divine encounters end as suddenly as they began. Osiris gives you a final silent nod, his green skin radiant in the soft glow, while 1,000 lotus flowers unfurl at his feet. You sense approval? Or is it merely relief? Either way, you made it past the godly paparazzi. Next up, dealing with the kind of magical mayhem that even all-seeing deities occasionally miss. Let's hope your opening of the mouth spell doesn't backfire into a lifetime of hiccups. So you've done everything right, or at least you think you have. You wore the crispest linen, packed enough funerary bread to start your own ghostly bakery, let yourself get mummified by the best in the business, and even managed to slip in a shabdi or 12. But before you exhale into the breezy calm of Egyptian paradise, you discover the fine print. The afterlife is as full of surprise problems, glitches, and magical mishaps as a Friday night pyramid crawl. Welcome to the troubleshooting phase, where the tiniest ritual hiccup can send your soul straight to afterlife tech support. You step cautiously into a labyrinthine corridor. The walls flicker with torchlight, but one passage is suspiciously darker than the others. And of course, it's the only way forward. You whisper the spell you memorized as a kid, but nothing happens. Uh-oh. Turns out, not every spell is as waterproof as the Book of the Dead promised. And if your papyrus text was scribed on the cheap, you might find the crucial "no snakes, please" spell missing a page or two. Mainstream historians confirm the Book of the Dead wasn't a single official book at all, but a collection of hundreds of spells, handpicked and sometimes customized for each person. It's like building a playlist, except if you forget the monster repellent track, it gets a little too exciting. A quirky tidbit. Some tunes included backup mouth-opening tools awkward, fork-shaped implements in case your ghost mouth wouldn't work post-mummification. Imagine haunting for eternity, unable to eat, drink, or tell people your favorite soccer team hardly the afterlife you aimed for. Archaeologists have actually found these spares tucked in wrappings, which makes you wonder if ancient embalmers trusted their own work as much as they said they did. Historians still argue whether these backup mouth openers were emergency supplies or just spares left in by nervous apprentices who didn't want to get blamed for a silent ghost. Either way, you're now triple-checking your own toolkit, just in case. You try walking forward, but feel the telltale tingling of a magical booby trap underfoot. Too late you forgot the spell for "May my feet not fail me in the underworld," and suddenly you're tiptoeing through metaphorical quicksand. Maybe your cousin is laughing at you in the field of reeds right now. Some of the traps in decorated tombs weren't actually physical. Historians believe they were psychological obstacles, magical protection spells inscribed to spook greedy tomb robbers and keep wandering souls from straying off the proper path. Of course, modern scholars debate whether the ancient Egyptians genuinely thought all these mystical hazards worked, or if it was a case of just-in-case over-preparedness, like taping an evil eye to the back of your selfie stick. You pause at a painted door that refuses to open, even when you recite lines copied from the neighbor's Book of the Dead. Maybe you're enunciating wrong, or you accented the wrong syllable. Ancient Egyptian is not your first language after all. The wall itself must have a sense of humor, because it whispers back in a garbled voice, "Try again, mortal," before slamming shut. Deep breaths. Remember that magic cone of scented fat? Well, you wish you'd brought two, because the afterlife is not as user-friendly as advertised. Sometimes you'll find yourself in what feels like endless hallways, doors leading nowhere, or looping mazes so confusing you start to question your navigational skills. Or maybe just the sobriety of whoever first mapped out the do-it. Historians still argue whether the sprawling underworld described on tomb walls was a true religious dogma or an epic piece of imaginative art to scare impressionable children. Either way, one wrong turn, and you're bumping into the same painted lion hippo demon 3 times in a row, each time pretending it's your first meeting. "Hey, Bobby, love the mane. Didn't I see you at Osiris's mixer?" Now let's talk magical passwords. In the Egyptian underworld, doors, river crossings, and underworld bureaucrats demanded passcodes. Mess up one syllable, and you could end up stammering before a crocodile-headed judge with zero patience for improv. Most ancient Egyptians went all out to inscribe secret knowledge on their tombs or papyri, sometimes even hiding spells behind their ears. Which, yes, sounds like a setup for a magician's trick. Did scribes make mistakes? All the time, especially as spells got copied from friend to friend or ordered at the equivalent of a mystical drive-through. Modern scholars argue whether many of these errors sent real souls wandering the corridors forever or just entertained future archaeologists. And don't think everything is solved with magic. If you failed to please the household gods in life, you might find yourself haunted by the awkward ghost of Uncle Menkaur, who wants to dispute last year's festival seating chart. Remember when you took my after-dinner fig cake? Well, now I'm swiping your afterlife lunch for a millennium. Petty feuds can linger. Apparently think of this as ancient Facebook comment drama, but in 3D and with more jackals. Even your Shabdi helpers might rebel. Sure, you enchanted them to do your chores, but what if the script was copied from a poorly proofread template? Suddenly, you find your servant statues lounging around sipping spectral beer instead of plowing your fields. Historians note that spells often varied wildly between tombs, so not everyone's Shabtis were equally motivated, a fact that surely disappointed more than one soul, hoping for a well-organized eternity. Sometimes the real problems come from the living. You may have planned the perfect afterlife, but tomb robbers, squabbling priests, or even careless descendants can shuffle your artifacts or swap out your prized amulets for knockoff imports. Debates still swirl over how much the living could mess up your posthumous experience. Did one wrong move doom a soul? Or would the gods forgive a broken canopic jar or an upside-down scarab? It's one of those things no one agrees about, but everyone loses sleep over except, perhaps, the dead. Still, you trudge on. The beauty in the Egyptian afterlife isn't perfection. It's persistence, even through enchanted breakdowns, mystical delays, and a few cosmic jokes. In the grand tradition of all those who came before you, you mutter your password, reset your magical GPS, and step one more time into the maze. Maybe the field of reeds is just beyond the next frustrating, stubbornly locked door. Or maybe you've just got to give it one more heartfelt try and hope the gods are in a generous mood tonight. Securing your eternal reputation is a task that would probably make even the busiest social media influencer break out in a cold sweat. In ancient Egypt, just as much as today, how you are remembered can shape your standing forever, except their forever really meant eternity, which is, let's face it, a lot more commitment than an Instagram post. As you settle into your afterlife prep, you realize that your image, the way you're painted, carved, and talked about matters just as much in the field of reeds as it did back by the Nile. You glimpse your tomb walls, squinting to admire those painstakingly painted scenes of you looking suspiciously more muscular and wrinkle-free than you ever managed in life. The artist, sweating in the torchlight, did not get creative license for that double chin. If you were someone important, your every deed awesome or awkward is now plastered for celestial review, immortalized in colors that fade less than most friendships. Scenes show you generously handing out bread to adoring servants, wheeling in a giant fish from a river that looks nothing like the Nile, or maybe just chilling out with a harpist as if your whole life was one long spa day. The official message: here lies a person worth remembering. This visual legacy isn't just about personal vanity. Egyptians believed the soul the Ba needed people alive to keep saying your name, telling your stories, and swinging by your tomb with tasty donations every festival. Every offering left, every praise spoken, every recited spell built your star power in the afterlife. It was their version of likes and shares. In fact, here's the historical fact for tonight. Egyptians thought your name had literal magical power. To erase your name from your tomb or monuments was considered a fate worse than physical death, essentially deleting you from both history and paradise, your own eternal account suspended moment. Funerary priests would be hired sometimes for hundreds of years into your afterlife, just to keep your memory, rituals, and offerings alive. Hustling from tomb to tomb, their job security depended almost entirely on just how generous you'd been earlier. You really had to tip well if you wanted that ongoing afterlife coverage. Otherwise, your memory might disappear faster than a fresh loaf at a construction site. But here's a quirky twist. Tomb robbers, ever the influencers of the ancient world, posed a real hazard. These not-so-subtle opportunists weren't always after gold. Sometimes their vandalism included defacing your name and image. There's evidence that feuding families would sneak into a rival's tomb, chip off their likenesses and hieroglyphs, and hope the gods would unfollow that person's soul for good. It's the ultimate ghosting strategy, if a bit excessive. Then you have the even stranger threats to your reputation: grumpy priests and bureaucratic enemies. Historians still argue whether political purges or simple pettiness caused the deliberate erasure of some names from monuments. Was Queen Hatshepsut's legacy smudged out as revenge by her stepson? Or was it some grander cosmic cleanup? The debate continues. Being remembered correctly was an obsession. Pharaohs actually built extra statues of themselves, backup accounts, as it were, just to hedge their afterlife bets. If one statue went out of fashion or got toppled during a dynasty swap, at least another still stood. This overwhelming anxiety for immortality pumped energy into mortuary temples. You might have spent your entire life hoarding gold, land, and perfume, just so your descendants could afford priests to keep your afterlife feed active. Performance reviews happen through yearly ancestor festivals, like WAD and the beautiful Feast of the Valley. Good reviews meant more feasts, more flowers, and more chance someone would remember your favorite jokes. Of course, not everyone could afford such afterlife insurance. The rich had the luxury of elaborate tombs, personalized statues, and generations of paid priests. Ordinary folk? Maybe a little stela, a heartfelt song, and the undying hope that a great-great-grandchild wouldn't forget your birthday. Some even sneaked their name onto group tombs or sponsored local shrines, dropping subtle hints. Hey, mention me in your prayers. It was the ancient version of tagging yourself in someone else's memory. But don't get too smug just yet. Your tomb wasn't safe, even if you had 6 lockable doors and a curse or two. Over the centuries, tomb robbers, invasions, desert floods, or economic collapse could all erase your afterlife legacy in a puff of sand. Sometimes even loved ones would repurpose your tomb space if money ran out, chiseling your name to make room for Uncle Neb. It seems eternal fame, like everything, is subject to budget cuts and family politics. You begin to appreciate how desperate Egyptians were to craft that bulletproof reputation. Some even penned letters to the dead, complaining about lazy priests, or asking ancestor ghosts to settle petty lawsuits from beyond the grave. If there'd been a Yelp for mortuary service, you can bet those priests would have gotten some spicy reviews. Here's another oddity. A special class of magicians, called letter readers, claimed they could channel messages between the living and the dead. Need your reputation spruced up with Osiris? Hire one of these charmers to recite your greatest hits, stir up family drama, or just remind people you invented sliced papyrus. Historians still argue whether these magical correspondents truly believed in their own powers, or if it was just a fantastic side hustle to supplement the annual wheat harvest. So as you sweep the sand off your afterlife jacket, remember, every wall painting, every offering, even every simple spoken name is a thread in your eternal tapestry. The afterlife might swirl with riches, gentle breezes, and rivers of barley beer, but if no one remembers you, the banquet's over, and you're ghosting into oblivion with nothing left but faint echoes and the hope someone stumbles on your statue, dusts off your name, and whispers you back into eternity's glow. You blink against golden light, and suddenly you're not in shadowy corridors, or sand-filled tombs, or even dodging mouthy scribe ghosts any longer. You stand at the edge of the field of reeds Aru, the glorious Egyptian paradise. It's just as your ancestors described it. Endless green fields stretching beneath the sky, the color of turquoise. The Nile split into shimmering channels, date palms dangling with fruit, and every crop forever heavy with harvest. It's like somebody cranked up the idyllic countryside filter and never turned it off. Birds sing not the annoying ones that wake you up on weekend mornings, but the magical kind, somehow always on key, always swooping just low enough to make the air shimmer. Here, the sun rises and sets exactly when you want it to no alarms. No chores unless, for some bizarre reason, you actually want to do chores for eternity. Your sandals press against soft, dew-cool grass as you take a tentative step forward into this new existence. The air is dense with sweetness, the warm sigh of distant wind stirring the papyrus, and because some things are eternal, a faint hint of incense. If you listen hard, you might still catch the echo of ceremony drifting in from memories. The thumping drums, the ululating cries, the chanting priests. But here, everything is peace and plenitude. Your family is there, maybe looking a little less wrinkled, a little more glowy than you remember. You see old friends, beloved pets you didn't expect to show up, and every face is eager, relieved, whole. Let's be real. The Egyptians had opinions, a lot of opinions, on what paradise was supposed to be. Most believed that if you prepared properly, if you lived justly according to Matt, and if that heart of yours balanced out lighter than a feather, then the field of reeds would welcome you for the truest kind of forever. Food grows abundantly. Love is renewed. No one ever sends you to the market for missing onions. The scholarly debate, of course, lingers. Were the reeds literal, or a metaphor for transcendent peace? Did the ancient artists get it right, or were they working off vague divine Pinterest boards handed down by priests? No one agrees, even now. But here's something rare and wonderful. In Egyptian paradise, you're not alone. The point isn't just personal glory or endless Netflix in a fluffy cloud condo. It's community-shared feasts under impossible stars, games and music late into balmy evenings. Of course, there's always that one uncle who insists on retelling his infamous hippopotamus story for the 100th time, and maybe a neighbor shabby who thinks they're too good for farm work. Still, it's all wrapped up in a cosmic exhale, the knowledge that you passed your tests, survived your magical obstacles, and proved yourself kind and clever enough to hang with the greats. And about those cloudless fields, historians love to point out that paradise was, reassuringly, kind of ordinary. It looked a lot like home, only the bad stuff edited out. You could farm without blisters, fish without scorching sunburn, and if you wanted a little magical boat, was always ready to take you exploring. Ancient wall paintings hint at endless beer, banquets stacked high with cake and figs, and parties thrown by cow-headed goddesses, whose only real drama is running out of perfumed oil. That's the dream, right? No bills, no deadlines, just joy and ease on repeat. One last quirky touch. Some myths quietly admit you could get kicked out if you turned mean or crazy in the afterlife. There were handy doorways back into the mortal realm, in case you ever got bored of paradise or desperate for one of those lumpy loaves only Grandma could bake. Scholars still argue if this was meant to scare people into afterlife etiquette, or just an ancient way to cope with existential FOMO. But tonight, your eyelids grow heavy as you gaze on that impossible horizon, comforted by the soft lap of the Nile and the laughter of everyone you've ever loved. Your worries about spells, body parts, whether your second favorite shabdi would rebel fade into gentle irrelevance. Whatever comes next, whatever came before, right now you exist under wide blue skies, in warmth and plenty, surrounded by stories and soft green silence. As the scene dissolves, let yourself sink into calm. Picture the light of that endless sun dimming, twilight cooling the fields until every reed and lotus petal blurs into gentle shadow. The field of reeds, with its lush grasses and quiet waters, grows softer around you. The voices of family slower and more peaceful. Your hands feel weightless, your heart feather-light. Even ancient gods rest here, their laughter echoing like wind through tall stalks, never judgmental, just amused by your journey and the cosmic comedy of eternity. With each slow breath, imagine the quiet settling in no monsters, no tests, just tranquil safety. All that's left is gentle admiration. You made it. Whatever worries linger at the temple doors, they can wait. Let the past float down the river. Let the future arise in the safe silence of paradise. Your soul is hugged by time itself, rocked gently in dreams older than pyramids, softer than woven linen. So drift, knowing your courage and cleverness will always find a home here, or in every bright tomorrow. There's no need anymore for spells, for bargains, for planning the next move. Infinity is warmth, comfort, and a soft place to sleep. Good night.